Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to introduce Charlie Winn, the CRO of Liine, who's going to be talking about moving from bad data to booked appointments today. Charlie, thank you so much for being a sponsor of Scaling Up. We're so excited to have you here, and I'm very excited to learn more about what you're going to present today.
Sweet. Thanks for taking. Appreciate you guys having us. And I think this is the third Scaling Up and the third time we're here. So if we keep getting invited, we're going to keep showing up, if that's okay with you.
You keep doing great work.
Awesome. Well, I'll go ahead and begin. Thank you for everybody who is joining today. As Ratika mentioned, my name is Charlie Winn. The title of my presentation is From Bad Data to Booked Appointments. Why am I here, the one talking about this? I'm a co-founder at Liine. We're a software company. We're sort of a call tracking, marketing analytics, and ad optimization platform. So we work exclusively with healthcare specialty, dental, and vet practice groups, most of which are multi-site groups and platforms. I'm also our chief revenue officer, and I mentioned that because I basically spend all of my day talking to customers. So I've got a pretty good beat on what are marketing leaders doing today to try to get good analytics on the performance of their marketing campaigns and strategies. What are the challenges, and what are the ways to solve those? So got this slide up here real quick just to give some examples of the types of practice groups that we work with. Some of you guys are probably in the session, so if you are, thank you for joining us. In addition to being a part of Scaling Up, we also love to partner with Cardinal on a pretty consistent basis. So the logos at the bottom are just examples of some of the practice groups that we have teamed up with them on to help with the marketing strategies, and as you'll see in the presentation, really get the performance metrics around first and foremost booked appointments, but in a lot of cases actual revenue, and making sure that all of the paid ad campaigns are being signaled how many booked appointments are generated from those campaigns, so that the whole sort of marketing machine, if you will, is geared around driving what you're actually after, which is booked appointments. So let's go ahead and get into it. One more thing I also wanted to mention is, because we focus on healthcare specialties and dental and vet, we're HIPAA compliant. We sign BAAs with all of the practice groups that we work with as well. So as you can imagine, security of our system is a critical piece. A lot of people ask me that question, so wanted to mention that up front. So bad data. What is bad marketing data? We talk about this internally a lot, and if you follow us on LinkedIn, you'll hear us say the phrase vanity, or even more often proxy metrics, which are typically the analytics we see used by marketing leaders today, instead of actually knowing how many new patient appointments are booked from all of the marketing strategies that they are deploying. I've got the Michael Jackson bad up here. That I think I was telling our marketing director, one of the first songs I remember dancing to as a child was Michael Jackson bad. So we don't mean that bad. That's good, cool, bad. We mean proxy metrics that can actually be detrimental to your ability to optimize all of your marketing, ultimately to get more patients in the door. More specifically, wanted to give you guys some examples of what we typically see out there. So this is across the three core choices that patients have to reach out to your practice. Of course, they could pick up the phone and make an inbound call. A lot of folks in the session, I assume, or I know, now have patient self-scheduling, which is there's lots of advantages to doing that. And then filling out a web form where then your team needs to follow up with that patient. These are the three core ways that people reach out. So the most common things that we see in terms of proxy metrics or examples of bad data are for calls lasting over 60 seconds. Really common, or sometimes we see 90 seconds, but using the duration of that call as the sort of quality or success indicator in lieu of knowing if it's a patient and if they booked. For online bookings, using clicks into the scheduling platform. So usually it's pretty difficult for marketing leaders to tie actual appointments that were booked by patients to marketing channels. And so they're using the click for when a patient actually gets into sort of the scheduling apparatus, right? They don't actually know if that person scheduled an appointment, but they know they sort of entered the online scheduling domain. And then forms are just form submissions. So instead of knowing, was this form submission actually a patient, and ultimately we get a hold of them and book them? The form submission itself is often the core success metric or conversion action. And so I'm going to dive into one of these um, in more detail to give you an example of sort of how unreliable they are by themselves at indicating whether or not an interaction is even a patient lead, let alone, of course, whether they ended up booking an appointment. So one of my colleagues who is quite a bit smarter and more resourceful than myself um, spent some time really diving into 1 million Google Ads pay-per-click calls. And basically he ran a what's called a linear regression on those calls to try to understand what the relationship was between whether a call lasts 60 seconds or more and if it was actually a new patient lead. And so there's this metric here, R squared, which is 0.18. And what that really means in sort of layman's terms is a call lasting 60 seconds can explain whether that call is actually a new patient lead 18% of the time. And there's kind of a good analogy. I was talking to the person who put this together that I thought would be useful to really understand what this means. It would be like if you go to your primary care physician and he or she's trying to figure out how healthy you are, right? Or how's your health? And the only thing that they looked at was how many hours you were sleeping each night. Is that a part of being healthy? 100%, right? Are calls lasting 60 seconds sometimes new leads? Absolutely. But going back to the health analogy, there's so many other things that go into whether or not you are healthy. So only looking at how much you sleep at night is just going to give you a very narrow scope of what's actually going on, and basically like not reliably tell you whether a person is healthy, right? You've got diet and exercise, many other things that you would have to take into account. So same is true for these calls. Does the length of a call play a factor? Yes, sort of. But the actual contents of the conversation and other things like that are way more important in determining if this is actually a new lead. So the takeaway here is using calls lasting more than 60 seconds just really is not a reliable indicator of whether something, in this case, a call, is actually a new lead. Why is this detrimental to rely only on bad data? Sort of self-explanatory, but I mean, the impact of this on the business can be absolutely massive. So first of all, wasting dollars on marketing strategies and campaigns that aren't really turning into patients and revenue, because if you're using proxy metrics, you don't really know whether they're doing that. Two, just looking in general at the performance of everything that you're doing is going to be very difficult, and the analytics that you'll use if you're leveraging proxy metrics are going to be inaccurate. We're going to talk a little bit more specifically about why here in a second. And then the third, which has a lot of correlation with the first one, is optimizing your paid ads, right? The conversion actions, the success signals, if you will, that you send back to, let's say, Google Ads, to say to Google Ads, I want more of this. If that signal is not new patient booked appointment, then you're going to get a lot of other stuff that you don't care about that you were going to pay for. And that means that you're going to spend more money to get booked appointments than you really need to. And the switch that you've got to make is transitioning to sending booked appointments to Google Ads, because Google Ads and Meta are pretty good at getting you more of the thing you say you care about. So this slide is kind of me just like really hammering this point, but it's really important to understand calls, regardless of how long they last, clicks and form submissions just are not booked appointments, right? And gearing your mindset around that and thinking through the analytics that you're leveraging to, assess yourself, what's working and what's not, maybe with your agency partner, in your leadership meetings, with like your other leaders in the business. And a lot of folks I know on the marketing leadership side also attend board meetings, right? Going into, let's say, quarterly board meeting, and the board is like, hey, we spent $2 million on Google ads last year. Like, what's going on with that, right? Being able to show the actual booked appointments is critical. And these other proxy metrics, although are related, just are not a good way to answer those questions. So how to fix that? So I'm gonna go through a couple of sort of do-it-yourself steps in moving from that bad data to booked appointments. The shortcut, which I will very briefly explain at the end, is something that we've come up with and like the reason that our company exists. But first, we're going to talk about how you can yourself replace calls, clicks, and form submissions with actual booked appointments. Okay, kind of two phases to this. Okay, the first one is getting to the booked appointment. The second one is the next level of getting to revenue, which we're going to talk about as well. But if you're going to do this on your own, the first thing that you've got to do is capture or record all of the inbound calls that are coming in to the practice locations, all of the online booking submissions, and then also all of the web forms. And you've got to get the granular session data, including UTM parameters and the whole nine of all those interactions. Then you've got to export those into a single database. Could be Excel, could be like a BI tool if you have resources on your team to be able to do that. And so then you have everything aggregated together in sort of one data set. But then there's a big problem, which is deduplication, because it's super common for the same patient to have multiple touches or types, of touches prior to them scheduling an appointment. So for instance, I could see a Google ad, click on a link, get to a landing page on a site, call in to the practice. So I'm a Google ad lead who's calling in, and let's say I don't book an appointment in that situation. But then later that night, when the practice is closed, I remember that group has patient self-scheduling on their site. And I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and secure an appointment. So this time I just go to Google and find that practice website again, and I book my own appointment. So if you're not deduplicating those, meaning like that's me, the same person, then your funnel metrics around just lead count and conversion rate is going to be totally off. Also, in a vacuum, if you're just looking at that online booking by itself, you're going to think that's organic search, when in reality, it's the person who called in earlier from the Google ad, right? So being on top of that is really, really important because again, it's very common that an example like that is happening. So that's what you have to do there. Then you've got to figure out, okay, of all these folks, like who actually booked, especially for the calls and forms, because an online booking inquiry, I guess, is a booking, but calls and forms, you have to figure out if there's a patient record in a booked appointment for that person. So you would also need to export data from your EMR, your PMS. All of this, by the way, in a HIPAA compliant area, right, to be able to match these things up. We'll talk about match rate in a second, but you would be using phone number in this example to find those patient records that are matching up with the calls and so forth. So then let's say you've done all that, and then you've got the booked appointments based on marketing campaigns. We'll use Google Ads as an example. Then you've got to manually upload the click IDs that are associated with the booked appointments into into Google Ads rather, to signal to Google Ads which of these campaigns are actually driving, bookings. And then the final piece is hopefully be able to put together some visuals or some reports right inside of that, whatever you're using as a database, so that you could access it before you're going into meetings and so forth, and be able to see over time what the progress looks like. This is doable, right? This is not impossible. It is a tall order. Some folks on the call may have figured out a way to do this. Some may have embarked on it, but it's quite an undertaking. but it is what's required to be able to move to analyzing performance based on booked appointment and optimizing the ads. That's phase one. Phase two, next level, right? Sort of the holy grail, which is, all right, what is the revenue that was generated from, all of these efforts? And so in that same data set, if you've got the EMR information that's coming in, then you would want to be tracking the show rate. So, hey, we know we've got a booked appointment. How many of these people ended up showing up to that appointment? Need to be a category of like who's got an appointment in the future because they haven't had a chance to come in yet. And then the folks that did come in, which of those turned into revenue, right? Who got a treatment or a procedure done. And then that revenue, of course, being tied back to the specific campaign levels to know the dollar amount that's being, generated. So if you do this, when you go into that board meeting or that leadership meeting, like you are going to look really good, right? Because you're going to have all the answers around what are we actually getting, from these efforts, and you're going to be able to show that, hey, guess what? We've made our ad platforms as efficient as possible because we're signaling to them we need you to go get us more booked appointments, not the proxy metrics like the calls lasting 60 seconds or 90 seconds or more or whatever. Okay, that's the do it yourself. The shortcut, if you will, is, again, this is hard to do, right? So some people may have figured out how to do it, but we built Liine to make this way easier. Okay, so we know that everybody needs to have really accurate measures of success, like we've said, moving from bad data to booked appointments. Someone internally once said, proxy metrics tell a story, but never tell the truth, which I think is pretty catchy. Think about that one. And so what Liine is doing, right, is we are capturing and recording all of the interactions that are coming in, the inbound calls, the online bookings. We integrate with most of the online booking platforms out there and the web forms, aggregating, reconciling. So you're going to be able to understand how many booked appointments are coming in from all these channels. Why aren't some of these folks booking? We integrate with all the ad platforms, so you're optimizing your campaigns for actual, booked appointments. And you'll see a few examples here in a second. But on average, when a practice group switches from sending proxy metrics to their, I'll use Google Ads again as an example. When they move from using proxy metrics as the primary conversion actions to using booked appointments, on average, the cost per booked appointment of Google Ads reduces by 40%. Pretty remarkable. And those results typically happen in a fairly short amount of time. You'll see some case studies here in a second. And it's usually in the 3 to 5 month range when we see the results that I'm going to show you in a second. Last thing, we now are integrating with the EMR or PMS systems that hold the actual patient records, so we can follow that patient, not just from booked appointment to did they show up and what revenue did they turn into. Match rate or match back is a challenge. Most people, if they're trying to do what I showed you in the do-it-yourself version, are going to be leveraging phone number as the match back identifier, right? And that's better than nothing. But there's lots of scenarios, and especially depending on what type of practice you have, it can make it really difficult to rely on that. Orthodontics would be a good example, where parents are calling from the same phone number for lots of different kids, and that's going to mess up the data. So we use something we call entity detection, where we have 9 or 10 other data points, not just phone number, because we're analyzing all the interactions that are coming into the practice. So you've got, full name, date of birth, legal address, type of procedure, so on. And on average, the matchback rate is just under 98%. So very reliable, even in a specialty like orthodontics, to make sure that you are truly connecting real dollars to the marketing campaigns that you're using. Couple of examples. Winn, again, optimizing Google Ads for booked appointments instead of proxy metrics. So we got 5 different platforms here. Going to highlight the second row, the cost per booking the reduction in cost per booking. And so the two on the right, you can see are groups that we work with mutually, with Cardinal. And again, what's going on here is you're telling Google Ads, hey, what I want you to do is to prioritize decision making around investing dollars into certain campaigns, among other things, based on what's driving actual appointments. This is particularly important when leveraging something like Performance Max, campaigns, because you're leveraging lots of, Google's AI, capabilities and sort of the whole suite of channels that Google has access to advertise on. And I like to think of it as you're sort of letting Google run wild a little bit. And so if you don't give it the parameters of like, hey, you could go run wild, but you need to deliver booked appointments. There's lots of, especially because it's Halloween time, lots of horror stories about especially PMAX campaigns driving a ton of non-qualified stuff, especially spam stuff. There's a lot of form situations out there where PMAX will tap into like syndicated search channels, drive a bunch of form fills because it thinks you care about forms. And then your team is calling them and the people are like, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? All of those horror stories are solved by switching to booked appointments. But as you can see, again, this is in a typically a 3 to 5 month period of time. This change from bad data to booked appointments significantly reduces cost per booking. So envision going into that leadership meeting. Hey, I can tell you exactly how many bookings and how much revenue we're getting from Google Ads. Also, by the way, we have cut our cost per booked appointment in half. That transforms the conversation, and gives you so much more leverage and autonomy over getting more budget for marketing strategies, and it's just a whole different world, to live in. So that's my talk. I hope that was helpful for the folks that are listening in. I'm going to open it up for questions here in just a second. This slide, there's a couple of QR codes on here. If you feel like, hey, I thought that was really interesting, useful information, you just want to rap about it, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, to have a conversation about anything relevant to what I just went through. If you think that we could help you, like Liine could be helpful in your world and what you're working on, this QR code goes directly to a form fill. We've got some of my most esteemed colleagues on standby who will reach out to you and gladly set up some time to connect. So thank you guys so much again for joining. And again, I'm going to open it up for some questions to see if anybody's got anything they want to talk about. All right. Call tracking, front desk never follows up, form fills, automated way, easier to call. Yeah. So we've got, just to speak to Liine, we have an auto call feature. This question is about my team struggles to follow up with web form fills. Is there a way to automate it or make it easier? If you don't have a CRM already and need assistance with that, we have an auto call feature. So the moment the patient submits the form, we actually call your team. So they answer a ringing phone and they hear press 1 to call Charlie. You have a new web lead from Charlie. And so it enables them to call somebody within 30 seconds. So I'm sure there's some other options for auto calls out there, but we definitely have one. Okay, prioritize online scheduler line. Okay, Taria, you actually answered that. Thank you. Call tracking was integrated with Google Ads, basically optimizing blind. What's the first thing we should fix to get accurate data? Okay, call tracking isn't integrated with Google Ads. So that would change that immediately. I'm not sure what call tracking this person was using, but you definitely need to make sure that your analytics tool is sending back information to ad platforms like Google Ads. So make sure you've got that connection. The question is, what's the first thing we should fix to get accurate data? To get accurate data, the first thing you should do is what I was talking about, right? Make sure you move from proxy metrics to the booked appointments. We were told, here's another question. We were told call tracking is not available because of the HIPAA Google Pixel issue. Does Liine have a way around that? Good question. So optimizing ad platforms, right? You don't need to mess with a pixel for that, because what you're doing is you're getting the click ID. So we'll use Google because this question is about the Google Pixel. You need to capture the GCLID, the Google Click ID, and any UTM parameters associated with that interaction. Let's just say it's a call. So you've got a call with that tag. And then if you're doing what I described earlier, or if you work with Liine, you're going to know if that call was a lead and a booked appointment. There's not going to be any information, however, when we send that back to Google about the patient. It's just this Google Click ID with this UTM parameter resulted in this thing, right? So no patient information, and the action of optimization is Google seeing that the things that it's doing, the campaigns that it's running, and so forth, are either successful or not based on that primary conversion action, not like finding other people that look like that. When you think about pixels and HIPAA issues, that's when you're getting into things like building lookalike audiences or retargeting, which is a different category of marketing, right? As opposed to optimizing your paid ads. So call tracking is not an issue if you're doing the things that I was just saying. Next question, best frequency for manually sending feedback to Google. Oh my gosh. All the time. So, I mean, if you're manually doing it, I mean, daily or a couple of times a week. That's a really good question. And I've never manually, done that myself. But if you're doing the do it yourself and you're manually sending back, like it is going to need to be very frequent to be able to see progress. Okay, working for a provider of post-acute care, we don't book appointments, rely on referrals. Suggestion on how to show value that isn't purely down to confirmed referrals or remits tied to calls and forms. I'm not sure I fully understand that one. I think it sounds like referring offices are maybe like booking on behalf of the patient. There's different ways to think about dealing with stuff like that in referrals. We don't typically, mess or help as much with something like that, but I would need to know some more information. So, Simon, it's a great question, and if you want to talk more about that offline, I'm happy to do so. How do you guys go about deduping unique appointments or patients? So inside of our system, it is based on the phone number and like our lead ID. When we're matching it to the EHR, right, or the PMS, that is when we're using the other data points besides just phone number. But the example I gave of like I call in, I don't book, and then I book online, that connection is going to be based on phone number. Do you integrate with FreshPaint? We don't have a direct integration with FreshPaint. Really, the groups that use us in FreshPaint are leveraging, I guess, for things like if you need to do lookalike audiences or retargeting, so you would need to have it for that. And then certainly using, GA4, we can send information back, into GA4. And I'm not sure, to be honest, exactly the mechanisms that FreshPaint does to, mess with that or anonymize that. But in terms of our integrations with the ad platforms like Google Ads or Meta, we're just sending back, right, the click ID with the anonymized, conversion action. So that aspect of it that we talked about today, there's no patient information, so HIPAA compliant. Strict compliance team. Will the strict compliance teams have fears? Our cited GCLID is now considered PHI, which sounds like a stretch. Wondering your opinion. Ours. Okay, I see. Cited GCLID is considered PHI. What's up, Cliff? Good to see you again. Happy to talk about that in in more detail offline. But there is no like if all you're doing is sending back a Google Click ID with the conversion action, there just isn't a mechanism to tie that to a person. And so again, we can chat about that if you want to ping me to discuss. Patient. If it's not a patient, it's not a patient, right? I'm not sure I'm following that one. Let's talk about that later. Okay, we're at time. Thank you guys so much.